Welcome, everyone. Ready to dive into the world of Tron?
Oh, yeah, this is going to be fun.
We've got articles, design documents, even a documentary all about Tron.
Buckle up.
Yeah, we're going to trace its creation, the reaction back in '82, and why it still matters, even today.
What's wild about Tron is that it wasn't just a movie. It was like
A prediction.
yeah, almost like looking into a crystal ball, It showed this future where humans and technology like totally blend together. It was.
It was mind-blowing back then.
Yeah. And guess what? A lot of what it showed is like our reality now. Crazy.
Yes, totally. Okay, so let's start with the guy who dreamed it all up, Steven Lisberger.
Mm.
I read that he went from art school straight to making his own little animation studio.
Yeah, Lisberger, he was totally into animation, but he wanted to do things differently. He was really drawn to, what was it called?
Backlit animation.
Yeah, backlit animation. It's this technique where you shine light through masks right into the camera lens, and it creates this...
Must be a vibrant look.
Yeah, vibrant, otherworldly,
I remember in that documentary you sent over, there was some early test footage. It was pretty cool even back then.
Bold move for the time. I mean, picture this. A neon yellow, like, cyber athlete throwing these discs of light. That was Tron at the very beginning. And get this, he named Tron after his father-in-law's company.
No way.
Yeah. This was called Peltron. It was kind of a mix of Pelinda, that was his sailboat, and Electronic.
So random, and it became this iconic name. But Lisberger, he didn't just want to make a little animation test, right?
Yeah.
He had bigger plans.
Oh, yeah, way bigger. He loved movies like Jaws and Star Wars, big epic films. He wanted to create that kind of experience, but with animation.
Merging art and technology.
Exactly, but, nothing's ever easy, right? The road to Tron, let me tell you.
It wasn't all smooth sailing.
You got that right.
And this is where Donald Kushner comes in, right? He was a theater producer and lawyer who joined forces with Lisberger. They made Olympics together, those animated films about the Olympics.
Right. And... out of nowhere, bam, the U.S. boycotts the Moscow Olympics in 1980. It totally messed up their plans.
What a twist. Did they just give up on everything?
Had to change course, And that's when Tron really started to take shape. They moved their studio to Venice, California, to be closer to, all the talent at the big studios. They even got Brad Bird on board, the guy who directed The Incredibles.
Wow, talk about a dream team. But getting money for a film like Tron back in the early 80s with all that new tech, that couldn't have been easy.
Oh, it was a nightmare. They went to studio after studio, and everyone was like, nope. Computer graphics were just starting out back then. Most execs, they looked at the storyboards and the early CGI, and they just...
didn't get it.
Totally. It's crazy to think that Tron almost didn't happen.
Like it could have just vanished before it even began.
It almost did. But then they went to Disney.
Disney.
Yeah. At that time, Disney was really looking for something different, something groundbreaking.
But, were those Disney execs really into tech?
Probably not. They were definitely skeptical. It was a huge risk. Remember, this is before, everyone had a computer on their desk.
I can just imagine them watching those early CGI demos like, what is this digital world thing?
Yeah, probably. But Lisberger and Kushner, they were determined. They made this test real, combining real actors with that awesome backlit animation and some early computer-generated stuff.
Like a glimpse into the future.
Exactly. And that test reel, it sealed the deal. Disney took a chance, a big chance, and said, let's do this.
Wow. But I bet even inside Disney, there was some pushback. Like the animation department, those guys probably weren't thrilled about these tech guys coming in and shaking things up.
Let's just say they weren't exactly welcomed with open arms. They were seen as outsiders, messing with the traditional way of doing things. But honestly, I think that outsider energy is part of what makes Tron so special.
Yeah, totally. So here they were, this small team at Disney with limited technology, trying to create a film unlike anything anyone had seen before.
It's incredible they pulled it off. And the visual effects. A total revolution. Remember those suits with all the glowing lines? They filmed those scenes in black and white on a completely black set.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah.
How did they even do that with the tech back then?
It was this crazy process. They used backlit animation and basically isolated different parts like the body, the circuit lines, even the whites of the eyes, and filmed them separately. Then they layered it all together.
You sent me an article about that. It was fascinating. Each frame must have taken forever with those old computers.
And get this, they couldn't even print those frames digitally. They had to point a film camera at a computer screen and film each frame one by one.
Crazy.
I know. We take digital filmmaking for granted now, but these guys, they were pioneers.
It's amazing how far we've come in such a short time. And on top of all that, there were like 4 different computer graphics companies working on the film, each one specialized in something different.
Yeah. Triple I, they were great at those really complex models like the recognizers, while Angie Synthovision, they did the more organic stuff like the energy effects. It was a huge project, so they had to split it up.
That must have been a nightmare to manage all those teams.
Communication was key. They used these huge spreadsheets called exposure sheets with numbers for each frame. And then someone had to like manually type those numbers into the computers.
Oh man, so tedious. It's one day ever slept.
I know, right? And then there's that story about how the film stock almost ruined the whole thing.
What?
Yeah, they found out totally by accident that the film they were using was causing all these inconsistencies. Turns out they were just grabbing boxes of film randomly from the delivery trucks, and Kodak, they had numbered them in a specific order for consistency.
So they almost got sabotaged by their own film.
Pretty much. They had to figure out how to work with those random flickers and glitches. They actually made them part of the story, like malfunctions in the computer world.
Yeah.
Kind of genius when you think about it.
Talk about making the best of a bad situation.
Right. They embraced the unexpected. Tron was all about pushing limits, making the impossible happen.
And that brings us to our next topic. We've talked about how Tron was made, but what about what it's actually about? It wasn't just pretty visuals, it had some big ideas that are even more relevant now than they were back then.
Oh, for sure. Tron tackled stuff like artificial intelligence, virtual reality, the whole relationship between humans and technology. It was way ahead of its time.
Yeah, let's dig into that a little deeper. I'm fascinated by how Tron basically predicted so much of our digital world today.
The way Tron showed AI was so cool. The Master Control Program, the MCP, it was like this rogue AI trying to take over the world.
Yeah. And it totally reflects our fears about AI today, right? Like losing control, technology becoming smarter than us. Tron had it all.
And it really plays on that fear. The MCP is this power-hungry thing that wants to control everything, the digital world and the real world. The way it uses other programs, it's like a warning about what could happen if AI gets too powerful.
One of the articles you sent compared the MCP to, like, modern-day worries about big tech companies having too much power. It's kind of spooky how similar it is.
Yeah, that article made some good points. Tron might be set in this fantasy world, but it was really talking about real fears about technology, and those fears are even bigger now.
It's like Lisberger saw the future. You know, he saw the problems before anyone else.
And then there's virtual reality. That was just starting out in the early 80s. Tron made this idea of a digital world where you could actually go inside and interact, and made that idea popular.
It was mind-blowing back then to think about going into a computer and, like, playing games and fighting battles. It was so ahead of its time.
It totally captured everyone's imagination. And it definitely inspired a ton of video games and movies, even how we interact online today. When people talk about the metaverse, Tron is always part of the conversation.
It was a product of its time, but also a vision of the future. It's amazing. But Tron wasn't just about cool visuals and futuristic ideas. It also asked a really important question. What's our relationship with technology?
Yeah, that's the core of it, right? And Tron doesn't give easy answers. It shows how tech can give us power, connect us, help us do amazing things. But it also shows the dark side, how we can get lost in the digital world, become slaves to the things we create.
Kevin Flynn, the main character, he shows that struggle perfectly. He loves the digital world because it's free, it's full of possibilities, but then he realizes it can be just as controlling as the real world.
Totally. His journey through the grid, it's like a metaphor for our own relationship with tech. We all want to connect, create, explore new things. But we got to be careful too. Tron is a warning. It reminds us that tech is just a tool. It can be used for good or bad.
It's a really important message, especially now when we're so connected to technology all the time. But Tron wouldn't be the same without its characters. They're not your typical Disney heroes and villains, are they?
No way. They're complex, they make mistakes, they're driven by good and bad things.
Yeah, like Kevin Flynn. He's not your typical action hero. He's more like a hacker, a gamer, someone who fights against the system.
He's an outsider, he's more at home in the digital world than the real one, and he'll break the rules to do what's right. He's relatable because of that. He feels real.
And Jeff Bridges, he was perfect as Flynn. He brought so much charm and vulnerability to the role. He made you believe in him, even when he was doing questionable things.
Absolutely. And then there's Tron himself. He's a program, a digital warrior, but he represents the best of humanity, you know? He's brave, loyal, selfless.
Bruce Boxleitner was fantastic as Tron. He was so strong and stoic, an iconic character for sure. What I find interesting is the relationship between Tron and Flynn. They're both fighting for the same thing, but they're from totally different worlds.
Yeah, their partnership is kind of rocky at first. There's a lot of mistrust, but as they go through challenges together, they form a real bond, a respect that goes beyond their differences.
And then you have the villain, the Master Control Program, the MCP. What a great villain.
Yeah, the MCP, everything a good villain should be. Cold, calculating, no mercy. He represents what can go wrong with technology, the loss of control, a digital dictatorship.
He's chilling. And Barnard Hughes' voice acting was amazing. That icy voice, it gives you goosebumps.
Oh, yeah. And Sark, the MCP's right-hand man, David Warner was so good in that role, so menacing.
Sark was the perfect henchman. Brutal and sadistic, totally loyal to the MCP. The guy who did all the dirty work, kept everyone in line.
David Warner clearly loved playing that part. He made Sark feel genuinely dangerous, a real threat to Flynn and Tron. But Tron isn't just about good versus evil, it's also about the women who get caught in the middle of it all, Laura and Yori.
Right, Laura and Yori, they're both strong, intelligent women who refuse to just sit back and watch. Laura's the brilliant scientist who helped create the digital world, and Yori's Tron's companion, fighting for freedom alongside him.
And Cindy Morgan was great in both roles. She brought such warmth and compassion to Laura, and she made Yori feel really fierce and determined.
It's great to see female characters who are active in the story, who drive the plot forward, who challenge things. They're not just waiting to be rescued.
Exactly. They're strong, capable women who fight against the MCP in their own ways. They add another layer to the film's message about what it means to be human in a digital world.
Totally agree. And we can't forget the music. It wasn't your typical orchestral score, was it?
Nope. Wendy Carlos, she was a pioneer of electronic music. She did the soundtracks for A Clockwork Orange and The Shining. But Tron let her really experiment and push boundaries.
Her score perfectly captures the whole vibe of the film, this futuristic, otherworldly feeling. It's a mix of analog and digital sounds. It's so unique.
It really is.
I read an interview where she talked about using all these different instruments like Moog synthesizers and a Crumar GDS digital synthesizer. It was a really experimental approach.
And it resulted in something truly special. It's both exciting and kind of haunting. It fits perfectly with the film's visuals and themes. It's a soundtrack that's aged really well.
Yeah, you can listen to it on its own, and it instantly takes you back to the grid. It's a masterpiece. But we've been focusing on Tron as a product of its time, but it's had a huge impact over the years, hasn't it?
Huge. Tron's legacy goes beyond just the movie. It's influenced filmmaking, video games, music, art, even how we think about technology itself.
It's still relevant today, even more so in our digital age.
Absolutely. It's worth taking a closer look at Tron's legacy because it's a fascinating story on its own.
Going through all the stuff you sent me, one thing that really stood out was how Tron has had this lasting impact, not just on movies, but on, like, everything, our whole culture.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, right? I mean, Tron had so many challenges, but it managed to connect with something like universal. People are still fascinated by it.
It's the visuals, for sure. Tron was a pioneer in using computer graphics. It opened up so many doors for filmmakers.
Totally. Those visuals, the glowing suits, the vehicles, the whole look of the grid, it was groundbreaking.
Yeah.
And it totally influenced science fiction movies. And it goes way beyond Hollywood. Think about video games. They've been hugely inspired by Tron.
It's true. So many games, like racing games, action games, they all borrow from that Tron style. The neon lights, the futuristic designs, it's everywhere.
And don't forget about the music. Wendy Carlos's score, it was a revelation. So many electronic musicians were inspired by it. It changed how people thought about film music.
It's one of those soundtracks you just hear and instantly know what it is, even if you haven't seen the movie in years. It's like part of Tron's DNA.
But I think the most important thing about Tron, what really makes it last, is what it's about, the themes it explores. Artificial intelligence, virtual reality, our relationship with technology. It dealt with all that stuff in a way that was really deep, especially for its time.
And those themes are even more relevant today, right? We're dealing with the impact of technology in a huge way.
Absolutely. Social media, AI getting more and more advanced, the line between digital and real life getting blurry. It's all stuff that Tron talked about decades ago.
It's a film that makes us think about the future we're creating, the choices we're making with technology.
It really does. And beyond the film itself, there's also the fans. The Tron community is amazing. They've kept the legacy alive.
Yeah, Tron fans are super dedicated. Fan art, cosplay, conventions, they even have real-life light cycle races.
It's wild. It shows how Tron is more than just a movie. It's like a cultural icon. It represents our fascination with technology, all the possibilities and dangers.
And that's why Tron still resonates today, I think. It captured the feeling of its time, but it also dealt with timeless themes.
It dared to imagine a future where technology was even more powerful, and it did it with style and substance.
As we try to figure out this digital age, Tron reminds us that the future isn't something to be scared of. It's something we can shape.
We have the power to use tech for good, to create a world where it helps us, connects us, makes us more human.
That's a great point. Well, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a question to think about. Imagine you could step into the grid, just like in the movie. What would you create? What kind of challenges would you face? What possibilities would you explore?
It's a good question. It makes you think about your own role in the digital future. Tron might be set in a fantasy world, but it's really about our own choices, the power we have to decide what kind of future we want.
So as you navigate your own digital life, remember the lessons of Tron. Be bold, be curious, and always question the systems around you.
And never forget the power of creativity, how it can shape the world we live in. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Tron.
It was fun.
Until next time, stay curious.